Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update.
Welcome to Industry Insight, where we unpack the ideas, trends, and technologies across industries shaping the way we work, live, and lead. I'm Lynlee. Not long ago, a series of AI-generated images started circulating online. Fantastical, whimsical scenes that looked uncannily like something out of a Studio Ghibli film. They weren't from the studio, of course, but from an image generator trained on thousands of artistic styles. It felt harmless, even charming. But it also raised eyebrows. So what happens when AI mimics a human artist or even an entire brand so convincingly that the lines between inspiration and imitation vanish? That's just one example of a much bigger issue. As generative AI tools go viral, they're also surfacing thorny questions about copyright, consent, regulation, and risk. Today, we're asking, what does responsible AI look like in practice? And who gets to decide? Joining us today to help untangle these questions is Braim, Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs at IBM Asia Pacific. Stephen works at the intersection of public policy, technology, and innovation, helping shape how governments and companies across Asia respond to the challenges of emerging tech. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lynlee. Great to be here.
Now, let's start with something a lot of our listeners have probably seen online. AI-generated art that looks like it came straight out of a Studio Ghibli film. Harmless fun, or does it hint at something deeper?
Well, I think, Lynlee, it's very important to understand that AI is actually a very powerful tool for good, and a lot of technologies can be misused. So it is a very concerning trend. But, we've been around for 115 years, bringing trusted technology to market. So in this space, we kind of have a lot to say and a lot to offer governments, particularly, as you point out, when AI can be misused to misrepresent individuals or artists. We're very keen at IBM in promoting trusted human-centered AI. Whether or not a company uses a public large language model or develops its own models, IBM's view is that scrutiny, explainability and governance must be built into every stage of the AI lifecycle. So IBM and other companies are spending a lot of time with governments on this issue to make sure that the regulatory frameworks protect content creators and very much protect the users of AI as we move forward.
Right. It's not just about aesthetics, right? This raises questions about ownership, attribution, and the pace of regulation. Now, take this beyond art. Say an AI tool is being used in recruitment or even loan approvals or healthcare diagnostics, and it gets something wrong. So who carries the responsibility?
Well, we very much feel that creators and deployers of AI need to be held accountable when something goes wrong. But if you work very clearly at the beginning to develop trusted and explainable AI, the opportunity for something to go wrong is reduced. The other point that needs to be put in place here is that AI doesn't replace human intelligence, it augments it. So in IBM, if we're using AI, whether it be in HR or compliance or customer insights, finance expenses, training, it very much does end up coming to an individual to make a final decision. But if you understand the data set and the data set is trusted and you understand as a user how that data was trained, you're in a much better position not to make mistakes. But if mistakes do happen, then accountability needs to very much go back to either the creator or the deployer.
And how are policymakers in Asia Pacific approaching this compared to the EU or the US?
Well, the EU has its AI Act, as an example, that governs the development and use of artificial intelligence. And IBM had a lot of input into that, and we think it's a very fair and balanced approach. In Singapore, which I know where you are at the moment, you've got the IMDA's AI Verify, which is all about verifying the data and the trust and building in ethics and integrity. The Japanese have a much more light touch approach, which they call soft law to AI regulation. And Malaysia, which I visited about 2 weeks ago, they've launched a national AI office and they're just completing a review of AI rules and regulations. A lot of governments in Asia are taking very much a balanced approach. So they're looking at risk of AI versus the sort of regulation, and IBM very much thinks that's the right way to go. The risk of AI in a chatbot or helping you fix your washing machine is very low. But if AI is being used by my brain surgeon or an automated car, I think we really would want a regulatory regime that reflects that risk and is a bit more stringent on the way AI is deployed.
But Stephen, it sounds like leaving accountability vague isn't just a legal risk. I think it's a reputational and societal one as well. Any thoughts?
Well, technology doesn't get adopted without trust. And that's what I was saying at the top there of IBM's 115 years. If you don't steward technology the right way and foster trust, you are going to have a problem. We've done some research that shows about 80% of business leaders cite AI explainability, ethics, bias or trust as a major roadblock for generative AI, with half of organisations acknowledging a lack of necessary governance and structures. If you think about AI in two ways, there's the large language model, so AI for consumers and the stuff that we see on the internet, and some of that is misused. Then there's a lot of enterprise type of AI, which is much more closed systems, uses an enterprise's own data, is very much designed with the enterprise that you're working with in mind. And so we can get around a lot of those trust issues by working very closely with enterprises. So separating out which sort of AI you're talking about is important, because the enterprise AI, which governments use and industry use, is where an economy will get the huge productivity dividends from the deployment of this technology. And I think governments and industry really need to focus on structures around ethics, transparency, programming, making sure that, for example, if an employee is talking to a chatbot, they know they're talking to a chatbot. If they're using AI for training, they're aware that it's AI-generated training. And all of those frameworks build trust in AI, and that's what I think governments in Asia and around the world are very, very collaborative when they're talking to industry about their frameworks and their trust, because governments know that if we don't have trust in this technology, it's going to be much harder to deploy it in a way that's really socially and economically beneficial.
So instead of that coming in after the tech is built, you're saying that it should be baked in from day one. But what does that look like?
Sure. If you take IBM or one of our clients, for example, you'd start with what's their problem set and how are we going to develop AI together to address a problem set, and you look at their data set and we talk to them about how they, and by the way, they own the data, so they own the insights that are created by the data that the AI then sits upon. So everything has to start at the grassroots level, which is why IBM, for example, we have our own ethics board to guide the way we develop and use AI both within IBM and with our clients. But it starts at the beginning. Once you've developed a piece of AI, if you try to retrofit ethics or accountability into something that already exists and may not have been properly designed to take account of it, I think that's where you can run into issues of perhaps answers that aren't accurate and people getting a bit confused on what's coming out of the AI and trusting what's coming out of the AI because it's not explainable, it's not transparent, and it wasn't built in a collaborative framework.
Okay, that's an important one, I think. Not a patch, but more like a foundation, like you mentioned. Now, something we don't hear as much about, the environmental footprint of AI. One estimate says a single day of ChatGPT use can consume as much electricity as 33,000 households. Should this be part of the governance conversation too?
It should be, and it is. And I had this conversation with the Korean government a couple of months ago as they're leading up to the development of their APEC framework, because they're hosting APEC at the moment, because you're dead right. Large language models require huge computing power, huge data center operations. They're expensive, they're energy consuming, and that does bring into account environmental issues. But if we move away from those at the enterprise level to much smaller enterprise-based AI models, you'll find that the cost and the energy consumption comes down enormously. IBM's also working with academic and industry partners to develop and use AI foundation models to look at how we modernise electricity grids, enhance their performance, and our greater use of renewable energy sources. So these grid foundation models are expected to be launched later this year. It's one step in trying to address the issue. But I think, ultimately the size and the cost and the energy consumption out of a large language model is going to become a boundary condition in those models. But as I said, they're not the models that are driving great productivity for industry. It's the much more smaller targeted models that industry is starting to use.
It's so convenient to use. It's easy to forget that such virtual tools like ChatGPT still have very real-world costs. But having said that, could sustainability become a competitive differentiator in AI development?
I think it's going to become one of them. Sustainability, trust, collaboration, ethics, they're all going to be intertwined. So none of us can ignore the sustainability component of this. Don't really want to get into those issues in depth in terms of the production and distribution of power, but I do think it's going to become an issue that's got to be addressed.
Okay. Stephen, you've been involved in a number of public-private collaborations aimed at building guardrails for AI. Can you walk us through what's happening on that front?
There's lots going on. There's a lot of work going on, for example, in Australia, where there's guardrails being developed by the government here, which are on a risk-based approach. IBM is also working very much on an AI alliance, where we've brought together more than 80 organisations across industry, startups, academia, research and government, from Berkeley to A-Star to the University of Tokyo, and startups such as Hugging Face and AnyScale to really build this alliance of trust together. In Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore is collaborating with IBM to demonstrate its Veritas Toolkit, integration with IBM AI governance solutions that help comply with MAA's fairness requirements. And then also in Singapore, IBM signed an MOU with AI Singapore around collaboration and to improve the first Southeast Asia large language models. So they're just a few examples, but there's a lot going on in the region around collaboration. We've also got an MOU with the Indonesians on AI that I work on. We've done a lot of work in Korea on these framework models. So there's no shortage of focus by the government, but it does come back to the fact that it's such a powerful tool that can drive great productivity and transformation that no government can ignore it. But they really do want to focus on driving the innovation and not stifling it by over-regulating it.
Now, it sounds like you're very familiar with the landscape. Where does Southeast Asia sit in this global governance landscape?
That's a great question. I would say it's been approached a little differently to the US and Europe, who I think have gone out faster and perhaps not hard. I think we're very happy with where particularly Europe has landed. But Asia, I think they're taking a little bit more of a considered approach. Singapore was very much a leader in this and a couple of years ago, and they've had a couple of cranks at the regulatory model. But I think Asia is being a lot more considered, a lot more collaborative in its approach. And I think one of the reasons is if you look across Southeast Asia, you've got a really interesting mix of countries with Singapore, mature, middle-income type economy. Take a Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, young, dynamic population models. So the opportunity for AI in both cases is huge. So I really think governments in Southeast Asia are really focused on how do we use AI as a technology leapfrog opportunity. So they're not running too fast down a path that would put in regulations that could stymie any of that.
Okay. And we're running out of time, Stephen, but let's bring this home for our audience before we let you go. For professionals and business leaders listening in, what should they be thinking about when it comes to deploying or working with AI?
Well, I think everybody should work with AI, and business leaders should really look at the structure of their organisations and see where AI can fit within finance and HR compliance, as I mentioned before. But they really need to start at ground zero and think about how they build AI or buy AI in a way that they understand the transparency, the accountability. They put in place an ethics framework, so they build trust around it. So the customers that they're serving, if they're using AI to serve the customers, will have all the confidence in the world that the services that have been provided are not going to cause damage, are not misused, and are going to be beneficial for what they've been designed for.
Okay, Stephen, thanks so much for joining us. Really insightful to hear how governance is evolving alongside the tech and why it matters for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lynlee.
That was Stephen Braim, Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs at IBM Asia Pacific. You've been listening to Industry Insight on Money FM 89.3. I'm Lynlee.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.